Have you ever found yourself wondering why the man you're dating seems distant, even when he's right there beside you? Why conversations feel surface level? Why he pulls away when things get real? Or why you feel like you're always the one doing the emotional heavy lifting? If you're an older woman navigating the dating world, you've likely encountered men who seem perfect on paper, but leave you feeling emotionally starved and confused about where you stand. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most crucial topics for women over 40, 50, and beyond who are looking for genuine connection and lasting love. We're talking about emotional unavailability, and more importantly, how to spot it early so you can save yourself months or even years of frustration and heartache. Before we jump in, I want you to know that this video could be the game changer you've been looking for in your dating life. So if you find value in what we're discussing today, please hit that like button to help other women discover this content. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and ring the notification bell so you never miss our latest relationship insights. Your support through comments, shares, and even super thanks helps us continue creating content that makes a real difference in women's lives. Now, let's uncover the hidden signs of emotional unavailability that every mature woman needs to recognize. Section 1. Understanding emotional unavailability in mature men. When we talk about emotionally unavailable men, especially those in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond, we're discussing something far more complex than simple commitment issues. These are men who have lived full lives, often with decades of experiences, relationships, and possibly even divorces behind them. Yet despite their life experience, they remain fundamentally disconnected from their own emotional landscape and incapable of forming deep, meaningful connections with others. Emotional unavailability in older men often manifests differently than it does in younger men. Where a 20-something might simply ghost you or play games, an emotionally unavailable older man has often perfected the art of appearing engaged while remaining completely detached. He's learned the right words to say, the appropriate gestures to make, and how to maintain just enough connection to keep you interested without ever truly letting you in. The challenge for older women is that these men often come with impressive credentials. They might be successful in their careers, well-traveled, articulate, and seemingly mature. They may have raised children, built businesses, or achieved significant life goals. On the surface, they appear to be everything you're looking for in a partner. But beneath this polished exterior lies a fundamental inability or unwillingness to engage in authentic emotional intimacy. Understanding this distinction is crucial, because it's not about intelligence, success, or even basic human decency. An emotionally unavailable man can be kind, generous, and even caring in many ways. He might remember your birthday, help you with practical matters, and show up when you need him for concrete tasks. But when it comes to sharing his inner world, being vulnerable, or creating genuine emotional intimacy, he simply cannot or will not go there. For older women who have perhaps experienced their own share of life's ups and downs, this can be particularly confusing. You might think that surely someone with so much life experience would be ready for something real and meaningful. You might assume that having gone through previous relationships, divorces, or loss, he would have learned the value of authentic connection. Unfortunately, life experience doesn't automatically translate to emotional availability. In fact, sometimes the opposite is true. An older man might have become more emotionally guarded over time, not less. Past hurts, disappointments, and betrayals can cause some men to build increasingly higher walls around their hearts. They might have learned to protect themselves so well that they've forgotten how to let anyone in, even when they genuinely want to. This is why it's so important to understand that emotional unavailability is not something you can fix, cure, or wait out. It's not a phase he's going through or a defense mechanism that will naturally dissolve once he trusts you enough. Emotional unavailability is a deeply ingrained pattern of relating that usually requires significant personal work and commitment to change, work that must come from within him, not from your efforts to reach him. As an older woman, you deserve so much more than trying to decode someone else's emotional limitations or waiting for someone to become available to you. You deserve to be with someone who is not only capable of receiving your love but also of giving love freely and authentically in return. Recognizing the signs we're about to discuss can help you identify emotional unavailability early, saving you precious time and emotional energy that you can invest in finding someone truly worthy of your love and attention. Section 2. The Sophisticated Mask. How older emotionally unavailable men hide. One of the most challenging aspects of dealing with emotionally unavailable older men is their sophisticated ability to mask their emotional limitations. Unlike younger men who might be more obviously detached or game-playing, older emotionally unavailable men have often mastered the art of appearing emotionally present while remaining fundamentally disconnected. These men understand the language of relationships. They know what women want to hear, and they've often had decades to perfect their presentation. They might speak eloquently about their past relationships, sharing just enough vulnerability to seem open, while never actually revealing anything truly personal or meaningful. They've learned to ask the right questions about your life, your feelings, and your experiences, creating the illusion of interest and engagement, without ever reciprocating with genuine emotional sharing of their own. This sophisticated masking makes them particularly dangerous to older women who are looking for authentic connection. You might find yourself thinking, finally, a mature man who gets it, only to realize months later that while he certainly understands the mechanics of emotional intimacy, he's completely unwilling or unable to participate in it himself. One of the ways this manifests is through what I call emotional tourism. He'll visit your emotional world like a curious traveler, asking questions, making observations, and even offering comfort or advice when you're going through difficult times. But he never actually moves in. He never sets up residence in the land of emotional intimacy. He remains an outsider looking in, observing your emotional landscape but never sharing his own. These men are often masters of deflection. When conversations start to get deep, or when you ask about their feelings, their fears, their dreams, or their vulnerabilities, they have an arsenal of sophisticated deflection techniques. They might turn the conversation back to you, compliment you on your emotional intelligence, share a philosophical observation about relationships in general, or launch into a story about someone else's experience without ever revealing anything about their own inner world. They're also skilled at creating the illusion of progress. They might share slightly more personal information over time, giving you just enough to feel like you're getting closer to them. But when you look back after months of dating, you realize that while you know more facts about their life, you don't actually know them any better. You might know where they went to college, what their ex-wife was like, how many children they have, and what their career challenges are, but you still have no idea who they really are. Underneath all of these external details, another sophisticated masking technique is the use of past trauma or difficult experiences as both an explanation and a shield. They might share stories about their painful divorce, their difficult childhood, or their struggles with loss, but they share these stories in a way that keeps you at arm's length rather than bringing you closer. Instead of using their experiences as a bridge to deeper connection, they use them as a wall to hide behind, essentially saying, "This is why I can't be fully available," without taking any responsibility for working on their emotional capacity. These men often have what appears to be emotional insight. They can analyze relationships, discuss psychology, and even give advice about emotional matters. But there's a crucial difference between intellectual understanding of emotions and actual emotional availability. They can talk about feelings the way a marine biologist might talk about fish, with knowledge and even fascination, but without any personal investment or authentic experience. Perhaps most frustratingly, they often present themselves as being ready for something serious. They might talk about wanting a partner, express loneliness about being single, or even discuss future plans that include you, but their actions consistently contradict their words. They remain emotionally distant, avoid deeper conversations, and resist any attempts to create genuine intimacy. This sophisticated presentation is why so many older women find themselves months or even years into relationships with emotionally unavailable men before they fully realize what's happening. The men seem so perfect, so mature, so ready for love, that it takes time to recognize that beneath the polished exterior lies someone who is fundamentally unable to show up as a true partner in the fullest sense of the word. Section 3. Communication patterns that reveal emotional unavailability. Communication is often the first place where emotional unavailability reveals itself. But with older men, the signs can be subtle and sophisticated. Unlike younger emotionally unavailable men who might simply not text back or give one-word answers, older emotionally unavailable men often communicate regularly and even eloquently. The red flags lie not in the frequency or quality of communication, but in the patterns and depth of what's being shared. One of the most telling patterns is surface-level conversation that never goes deeper. No matter how long you've been talking or dating, he might be an excellent conversationalist, entertaining, knowledgeable about current events, travel, culture, or professional matters. He can discuss books, movies, restaurants, and experiences with enthusiasm and insight. But when the conversation turns to feelings, vulnerabilities, fears, dreams, or anything that requires emotional transparency, he either changes the subject, gives generic responses, or finds a way to end the conversation. Pay attention to how he responds when you share something personal or emotional. An emotionally available man will usually match your level of vulnerability with something similar from his own experience. He'll ask follow-up questions that show he's truly interested in understanding your emotional experience. He'll remember what you've shared and refer back to it in future conversations. In contrast, an emotionally unavailable man might acknowledge what you've shared politely, but he won't reciprocate with anything personal from his own life, and he's unlikely to bring it up again or ask how you're doing about whatever you shared. Another red flag is what I call emotional interviewing. This is when he asks you lots of questions about your feelings, your past, your experiences, and your thoughts. But the conversation remains completely one-sided. You might come away from these conversations feeling heard and seen, but if you think about it, you don't actually know any more about his inner world than you did before. He's masterful at getting you to open up while revealing nothing meaningful about himself. Notice how he handles conflict or disagreement. Emotionally unavailable men often have two modes when faced with tension. They either shut down completely or they intellectualize everything. If you express frustration, hurt feelings, or concern about the relationship, he might respond with logical analysis rather than emotional engagement. He'll explain away your feelings, offer solutions to fix the problem, or worse, make you feel like you're being too emotional or sensitive for bringing up your concerns in the first place. Timing patterns in communication can also be revealing. While he might be responsive most of the time, notice what happens when you try to have deeper conversations. Does he suddenly become busy? Do his responses become shorter? Does he take longer to reply when you've shared something personal or asked something that requires emotional honesty? Emotionally unavailable men often unconsciously create distance when conversations threaten to become too intimate. Pay attention to his comfort level with emotions in general, both yours and his own. When you express strong feelings, whether positive or negative, how does he respond? Does he seem uncomfortable? Does he try to calm you down or minimize your emotions? Does he struggle to be present with you when you're feeling intense emotions, whether that's excitement, sadness, anger, or passion? Another pattern to watch for is the absence of future emotional planning. While he might make practical future plans like trips or events, does he ever talk about emotional goals for your relationship? Does he express desires for deeper connection, greater intimacy, or emotional growth together? Emotionally unavailable men often focus entirely on external, future plans while never discussing the emotional trajectory of the relationship. Listen for the language he uses when talking about relationships in general. Does he speak about past relationships with emotional insight and self-reflection? Or does he present himself as the victim of unreasonable women? Does he take responsibility for his part in relationship difficulties? Or does he blame external circumstances and other people's emotional problems? How he talks about his past relationships often reveals how he's likely to handle emotional challenges in your relationship. Notice whether his communication style allows for emotional nuance and complexity. Life is complicated, and relationships require the ability to hold multiple feelings at once. Can he express mixed emotions? Can he acknowledge when he's uncertain or conflicted about something? Or does he present everything in black and white terms, avoiding the gray areas where real emotional depth lives? Finally, pay attention to whether his words match his actions over time. Emotionally unavailable men often say the right things, but fail to follow through with behaviors that demonstrate emotional investment. They might tell you how much they care about you, but their actions suggest emotional distance. They might talk about wanting closeness, but they consistently maintain barriers to real intimacy. Section 4, the myth of timing. When not ready becomes a permanent status one. Of the most heartbreaking patterns that older women encounter with emotionally unavailable men is the perpetual promise of future availability. This man tells you he's not ready for something serious right now, but he implies or directly states that he might be ready in the future. He creates the illusion that timing is the only issue, and if you're just patient enough, understanding enough, and available enough, eventually he'll be ready to give you the love and commitment you deserve. For older women, this myth of timing can be particularly seductive because it seems reasonable. After all, he might be going through a divorce, dealing with the loss of a spouse, navigating career changes, helping aging parents, or processing other significant life transitions. These are legitimate life circumstances that can affect someone's ability to fully engage in a new relationship. The problem is when not ready becomes a permanent state of being rather than a temporary circumstance. The crucial distinction lies in whether he's actively working toward becoming available or simply using his circumstances as a convenient excuse to remain emotionally distant. A man who is genuinely going through a difficult time but is emotionally available by nature will usually be transparent about his limitations, give you realistic timelines, and show evidence of progress in working through his issues. He'll also be genuinely concerned about how his unavailability affects you, and will encourage you to make decisions that are in your best interest, even if that means leaving the relationship. In contrast, an emotionally unavailable man will use his circumstances as a shield against intimacy while simultaneously trying to keep you invested in the relationship. He'll give you just enough hope to keep you hanging on, but he'll never give you concrete timelines or show real progress toward becoming available. Instead, there will always be another reason. Another delay, another circumstance that prevents him from being fully present in the relationship. Pay attention to how long he's been in this not ready state. If he tells you he's been divorced for 3 years but still isn't ready for commitment, that's a red flag. If he lost his spouse 5 years ago and still can't emotionally invest in a new relationship, that suggests he may need professional help to work through his grief rather than a romantic relationship. If he's been single for years but always has a reason why he can't commit, you're likely dealing with someone who uses circumstances as an excuse for emotional unavailability. Notice whether his not ready status conveniently applies only to the deeper aspects of relationship while allowing him to enjoy all the benefits of your companionship. He might not be ready for commitment, but he's perfectly ready to have you as his regular date, his social companion, his confidant, and his source of emotional support. He might not be ready to plan a future together, but he's ready to make plans for next weekend. This selective availability is a clear sign that timing isn't really the issue. Another red flag is when his reasons for not being ready keep changing or multiplying. First, it was the divorce that wasn't final. Then it was work stress. Then it was his children who weren't ready to see him with someone new. Then it was financial concerns. Then it was wanting to be sure about his feelings. If there's always a new reason why he can't commit, you're not dealing with timing issues. You're dealing with someone who doesn't want to commit but also doesn't want to lose you. The most painful aspect of this dynamic is how it can make you feel like you're in competition with his circumstances rather than being chosen as a priority in his life. You might find yourself waiting for his divorce to be final, for his work situation to stabilize, for his children to adjust, or for him to work through his grief. But an emotionally available man doesn't make you compete with the other aspects of his life. He finds ways to include you and prioritize the relationship. Even when life is challenging, be particularly wary of men who seem to enjoy the intensity of new relationships but always find reasons to pull back when things start to get serious. They love the excitement of getting to know someone new, the passion of early attraction, and the ego boost of being desired. But when you start wanting more depth, consistency, and commitment, suddenly they're not ready. This pattern often repeats itself every few months in a cycle of intensity, followed by withdrawal. It's also important to recognize that some men use "not ready" as a way to test your patience and dedication. They want to see how much you'll sacrifice for them, how long you'll wait, and how much uncertainty you'll tolerate. This isn't about genuine timing issues. It's about control and ego gratification. A man who truly cares about you won't want to keep you in limbo indefinitely. The hardest truth to accept is that when a man is truly emotionally available and meets someone he genuinely wants to be with, he finds a way to make it work despite his circumstances. He doesn't use his life challenges as reasons to keep you at arm's length. He sees you as part of the solution to navigating life's difficulties together. Timing is rarely the real issue when it comes to emotional availability. Either someone is capable of emotional intimacy and commitment or they're not. Circumstances might affect the timeline, but they don't fundamentally change someone's capacity for emotional connection. Section 5. The compartmentalization trapone of the most sophisticated ways that older emotionally unavailable men maintain distance while appearing to be in relationship is through compartmentalization. These men have often spent decades learning how to keep different areas of their lives in separate boxes, never allowing them to touch or integrate. This skill, which might serve them well in professional settings, becomes a significant barrier to authentic intimate relationships. Compartmentalization in emotionally unavailable men manifests as an inability or unwillingness to integrate you into the full picture of their lives. You might be very important to them in one specific context, but you remain isolated from other significant areas of their world. This isn't just about not meeting his family or friends, though that can certainly be part of it. It's about a more fundamental separation where different aspects of his life exist in isolation from each other. For example, you might be his weekend companion, the person he sees for dinner dates, movies, and social events, but you're not integrated into his daily life, his family relationships, his friendships, or his future planning. Or you might be his emotional confidant, the person he talks to about his problems and concerns. But you're not his romantic partner in terms of physical intimacy or future commitment. He can be deeply connected to you in one area while remaining completely unavailable in others. This compartmentalization allows him to get his needs met in different areas without having to show up as a whole person in any relationship. He might get emotional support from you, social companionship from another woman, physical intimacy from someone else, and practical help from yet another person. No one gets the whole man because he's not willing to show up fully anywhere. For older women, this can be particularly confusing because the compartment you occupy might be very satisfying. If you're in his emotional support compartment, you might feel deeply connected to him and believe that you have a special place in his life. If you're in his social companion compartment, you might have wonderful times together and feel like you're genuinely partners in many activities. The problem is that compartmentalized connection isn't true intimacy, and it doesn't lead to integrated, committed relationships. Notice whether he maintains strict boundaries around different areas of his life. Does he talk about work but never let you into his work world? Does he discuss his children but never include you in that aspect of his life? Does he share his interests and hobbies but resist your participation in them? Healthy relationships involve gradual integration, where partners naturally begin to share and merge different aspects of their lives. Pay attention to whether he presents different versions of himself in different contexts. When you're alone together, he might be warm, affectionate, and communicative, but in social situations he might become distant, formal, or even treat you like a casual acquaintance. This isn't just about privacy or appropriate public behavior. It's about his inability to maintain a consistent, integrated sense of self across different contexts. Another sign of problematic compartmentalization is when he seems to forget about you when you're not physically present. He might be completely focused and attentive when you're together, but when you're apart, you barely exist in his world. He doesn't think to text you during the day, doesn't include you in spontaneous plans, and doesn't seem to carry thoughts of you into other areas of his life. This pattern is particularly painful because it can make you feel like you're competing with different aspects of his life rather than being integrated into it. You might feel like you have to compete with his work, his children, his friends, his hobbies, or his other responsibilities for his attention and emotional energy. In healthy relationships, partners find ways to integrate their loved ones into all aspects of their lives rather than keeping them confined to specific compartments. The compartmentalization trap is especially insidious because it can prevent you from seeing the full picture of who he is and how he operates in relationships. You only see the version of him that exists in your particular compartment, which might be wonderful, while remaining blind to how he handles other relationships and responsibilities. This limited view can make you believe you're more important to him than you actually are and that the relationship has more potential than it really does. Be wary of men who seem to have different rules and expectations for different areas of their lives. If he's professional and responsible at work, but chaotic and unreliable in personal relationships, That tells you something important about his priorities and his emotional capacity. If he's generous and thoughtful with his friends but stingy and distant with romantic partners, that reveals significant information about how he views intimate relationships. The most problematic aspect of compartmentalization is that it prevents the deep integration that real love requires. Genuine intimacy involves allowing someone to see and know all aspects of who you are, not just the parts that feel safe to share. It requires the courage to be consistent and authentic across all areas of your life, not just in the specific context where you feel comfortable and in control. Section 6. Mixed signals and emotional breadcrumbs, perhaps one of the most exhausting aspects of dealing with an emotionally unavailable older man is the constant stream of mixed signals and what relationship experts call emotional breadcrumbs. These are small gestures, words or actions that provide just enough emotional nourishment to keep you hopeful and invested while never delivering the full meal of genuine emotional availability and commitment. Emotionally unavailable older men are often masters at this technique because they've had years to perfect it. They understand exactly how much attention, affection, and connection they need to provide to keep you interested without having to fully commit or become vulnerable themselves. It's a delicate balance that allows them to have their cake and eat it too, maintaining the benefits of your companionship and emotional investment without having to reciprocate with genuine availability. These mixed signals often come in cycles that can drive you to distraction. He might be incredibly attentive, communicative, and affectionate for a period of time, making you feel like you're finally making progress in the relationship. Just when you start to relax and trust in the connection, he'll pull back, become distant, or create some kind of conflict that reestablishes distance between you. Then just when you're about to give up or confront him about his behavior, he'll come back with renewed attention and affection, starting the cycle all over again. The breadcrumbs might take many forms. He might send you sweet text messages but rarely make concrete plans to see you. He might be physically affectionate when you're together, but avoid any discussions about the future of your relationship. He might introduce you to some people in his life but keep you away from others. He might make romantic gestures occasionally, but resist daily intimacy and connection. Pay attention to the pattern of his attention and withdrawal. Does he become more attentive when he senses you're pulling away or losing interest? Does he suddenly become romantic and available when you've expressed frustration with his emotional distance? This reactive availability is a red flag because it shows that he's more motivated by the fear of losing his supply of attention and companionship than by genuine desire for deeper connection with you. Notice whether his actions consistently match his words over time. He might tell you how much he cares about you, but his behavior suggests that you're not a priority in his life. He might say he wants to spend more time together, but he rarely initiates plans or makes himself available. He might express interest in getting to know you better, but he never asks meaningful questions or remembers important things you've shared. Be particularly aware of love bombing followed by withdrawal. Some emotionally unavailable men will shower you with intense attention, affection, and promises early in the relationship, only to pull back dramatically once they feel they've secured your interest. This pattern is especially common with older men who have learned that mature women are less likely to be impressed by superficial gestures and more likely to require genuine emotional investment. The breadcrumbs often increase in frequency when he senses you might be losing interest or pulling away. He might send you a particularly sweet message, plan a special date, or suddenly become more communicative when he feels your emotional investment waning. But once he feels secure in your attention again, the breadcrumbs decrease, and he returns to his pattern of minimal emotional availability. Another form of emotional breadcrumbs is the promise of future availability or commitment. He might hint at wanting something more serious, mention future plans that include you, or suggest that he's working on becoming more emotionally available. These promises provide just enough hope to keep you invested while never actually materializing into real change or commitment. Pay attention to how these mixed signals affect your emotional state and behavior. If you find yourself constantly analyzing his actions, looking for hidden meanings in his words, or feeling like you're on an emotional roller coaster, you're likely dealing with someone who is deliberately or unconsciously using intermittent reinforcement to keep you hooked without having to fully commit. The most damaging aspect of this pattern is how it can make you doubt your own perceptions and needs. You might start to question whether you're expecting too much, being too sensitive, or misinterpreting his actions. You might find yourself making excuses for his behavior, or focusing on the positive breadcrumbs while minimizing the larger pattern of emotional unavailability. It's crucial to recognize that consistent, emotionally available people don't send mixed signals. They don't play games with your emotions or keep you guessing about where you stand. They communicate clearly, behave consistently, and work to resolve conflicts rather than creating cycles of closeness and distance. When someone truly wants to be with you and is emotionally capable of intimate relationship, they find ways to show up consistently, not just when it's convenient or when they need something from you. Section 7. The Intimacy Paradox. Wanting closeness while maintaining distance. One of the most confusing aspects of emotionally unavailable older men is their ability to simultaneously desire and resist intimacy. These men often genuinely crave connection, affection, and companionship, but they have an equally strong need to maintain emotional distance and control. This creates what I call the intimacy paradox, where they pursue you for closeness while unconsciously or consciously sabotaging the very intimacy they claim to want. This paradox manifests in numerous ways that can leave you feeling constantly off balance and confused about what he actually wants from the relationship. He might be the one to pursue you initially, expressing strong interest and desire to spend time together. He might be affectionate, attentive, and seemingly eager for connection. But as the relationship deepens and real intimacy becomes possible, he begins to create distance through various means. Sometimes this distance creation is obvious. He might suddenly become busier with work, less available for communication, or start creating conflicts that allow him to justify pulling away. Other times, the distance creation is more subtle. He might remain physically present but become emotionally absent. He might continue to go through the motions of relationship while withdrawing his authentic self from the connection. Pay attention to what happens when you try to deepen the emotional intimacy between you. Does he become uncomfortable when conversations turn to feelings, vulnerabilities, or deeper personal sharing? Does he change the subject, make jokes, or find reasons to end the conversation when things get too real? His response to your attempts at deeper connection will tell you a lot about his capacity for true intimacy. Notice patterns around physical intimacy as well. Some emotionally unavailable men are comfortable with physical closeness because it doesn't require the vulnerability that emotional intimacy demands. Others are uncomfortable with physical intimacy because it represents a level of connection that threatens their emotional walls. Pay attention to whether physical and emotional intimacy are integrated in your relationship, or whether one exists without the other. The intimacy paradox often shows up in his approach to conflict and difficult conversations. He might say he wants open communication and honesty, but when you try to address concerns or work through problems together, he becomes defensive, shuts down, or finds ways to make you feel like you're being too demanding or emotional. This reveals that he wants the benefits of intimacy without the work and vulnerability that real relationships require. Watch for patterns where he seems to sabotage intimacy just when things are going well. Some emotionally unavailable men become most distant when the relationship is at its best, almost as if happiness and closeness trigger their fears and defenses. If you notice that he consistently creates problems or pulls away when you're feeling closest to him, this is a strong indicator of someone who is fundamentally afraid of intimacy. Another manifestation of the intimacy paradox is his relationship with your emotions. He might say he wants you to be open and honest with him, but when you express difficult emotions like hurt, disappointment, or need for more connection, he becomes uncomfortable and tries to minimize or fix your feelings rather than simply being present with you through them. Be aware of how he handles your attempts to integrate your lives more fully. True intimacy involves gradually merging your worlds, sharing friends and family, making joint decisions, and creating shared experiences and memories. If he consistently resists this integration while claiming he wants closeness, he's showing you that he wants intimacy on his terms only, which isn't really intimacy at all. The intimacy paradox can be particularly painful because it can make you feel like you're doing something wrong or like there's something about you that makes him pull away. You might find yourself walking on eggshells, trying not to be too emotional, too needy, or too demanding, hoping that if you can just be the right way, He'll finally allow the intimacy that he claims to want. It's important to understand that this pattern has nothing to do with you and everything to do with his own fears, limitations, and emotional capacity. Someone who is truly ready for intimacy doesn't run from it when it's offered. They don't create distance when closeness is possible. They don't sabotage good relationships because things are going too well. The most telling sign of the intimacy paradox is inconsistency between his words and actions over time. He might talk about wanting closeness, express loneliness, or say how much he values your connection, but his behavior consistently maintains distance and prevents the very intimacy he claims to desire. This inconsistency reveals someone who is fundamentally conflicted about love and intimacy, someone who wants the benefits without the vulnerability and commitment that real intimacy requires. Section 8. Past relationships as roadblocks to future love. When dating older men, their relationship history becomes particularly significant because they've had more time to accumulate experiences, both positive and negative, that shape their approach to new relationships. For emotionally unavailable men, past relationships often serve as convenient excuses for current emotional limitations, creating roadblocks to genuine intimacy rather than lessons that lead to greater emotional wisdom and availability. Pay attention to how he talks about his past relationships, particularly his marriage or long-term partnerships. An emotionally available man who has done the inner work necessary for healthy relationships will usually speak about his past with a mixture of honesty, accountability, and growth. He'll acknowledge his own contributions to relationship problems, express understanding of patterns he wants to change, and demonstrate insight into what he's learned about himself and about love. In contrast, an emotionally unavailable man often presents himself as the victim of his past relationships. His ex-wife was crazy, demanding, or impossible to please. His previous girlfriends were too emotional, too needy, or too controlling. He was the reasonable one, the long-suffering partner who tried his best but was ultimately defeated by unreasonable women who expected too much from him. This victim narrative serves several purposes for the emotionally unavailable man. First, it allows him to avoid taking responsibility for his part in relationship failures, which means he never has to examine his own emotional limitations or work on changing problematic patterns. Second, it creates a justification for his current emotional walls, essentially telling you that he's learned to protect himself from demanding emotional women. Third, it serves as a warning that if you become too demanding or emotional, you'll join the ranks of his unreasonable exes. Be particularly wary of men who seem to have the same complaints about all their past relationships. If every woman he's ever been with was too needy, too emotional, too demanding, or too controlling, that suggests the common denominator is him, not them. Healthy relationships require emotional availability, vulnerability, and responsiveness to your partner's needs. If he consistently views these normal relationship requirements as unreasonable demands, he's showing you that he's not capable of healthy, intimate partnership. Notice how he handles discussions about what he wants differently in future relationships. An emotionally available man will usually focus on his own growth and changes, discussing what he's learned about himself and how he wants to show up differently in love. He might talk about communication skills he's developed, boundaries he's learned to set, or emotional work he's done to heal from past hurts. An emotionally unavailable man, however, will often focus on finding a woman who won't make the same mistakes his exes made. He's looking for someone who won't be too emotional, who won't expect too much, who won't push him for commitment or intimacy. He's essentially looking for someone who will accommodate his limitations rather than someone with whom he can grow and create something beautiful together. Attention to whether he seems to have processed his grief from past relationships, particularly if he's divorced or widowed. Unprocessed grief doesn't just go away with time. It requires active work and often professional support. A man who is still carrying unresolved pain from past relationships will struggle to be fully present and available in new ones, not because he doesn't want to be, but because he hasn't done the emotional work necessary to heal and move forward. Be cautious of men who seem to idealize past relationships while simultaneously using them as barriers to current intimacy. Some emotionally unavailable men will talk about their late wives or ex-wives as perfect, irreplaceable angels while using this idealization to explain why they can't fully commit to anyone new. True love doesn't diminish our capacity for future love. It expands it. A man who has genuinely loved and lost should understand the value of love and be motivated to find it again, not paralyzed by the memory of what he had. Another red flag is when past relationships are used as a measuring stick for current ones in problematic ways. He might constantly compare you to his ex, either favorably or unfavorably, rather than seeing you as a unique individual worthy of a fresh start. This comparison mindset prevents him from being fully present with you and shows that he hasn't really closed the chapter on his past. Watch for signs that he's still emotionally entangled with past relationships. This doesn't necessarily mean he's still in love with his ex, but it might mean he's still carrying anger, resentment, or unfinished business that prevents him from being emotionally available to you. If he's still fighting old battles, processing old hurts, or trying to prove points to people who are no longer in his life, he doesn't have the emotional energy to invest in building something new with you. The most important thing to understand is that past relationships should inform future ones, not paralyze them. A man who is emotionally available and ready for love uses his past experiences as learning opportunities that help him become a better partner. He doesn't use them as excuses for emotional limitations or as barriers to intimacy. He understands that every relationship is unique and that you deserve to be loved for who you are, not in spite of who his ex was. Section 9. The convenience factor. When you're perfect for no one of the most painful patterns that older women encounter with emotionally unavailable men is being treated as a convenience rather than a priority. These men often genuinely enjoy your company, appreciate your presence in their lives, and may even care about you deeply, but they view you as someone who fits nicely into their current circumstances, rather than someone worth building a future around. The convenience factor often masquerades as compatibility. He might tell you how easy you are to be with, how uncomplicated your relationship feels, or how perfectly you fit into his lifestyle. While these might sound like compliments, pay attention to whether this easiness comes from genuine compatibility or from your willingness to accommodate his limitations and make minimal demands on his time, energy, or emotional availability. Notice whether your relationship seems to exist primarily on his terms and around his schedule. Does he see you when it's convenient for him but struggle to make time when you need him? Are your dates planned around his availability, his preferences, and his needs? Do you find yourself constantly adjusting your schedule, your expectations, and your needs to fit into his life, rather than creating a relationship that works for both of you? The convenience factor often becomes most apparent when life gets challenging, or when you have needs that require him to stretch beyond his comfort zone. He might be a wonderful companion when things are going smoothly, but when you're going through a difficult time, need emotional support, or require him to be flexible and accommodating, he suddenly becomes unavailable or suggests that you're asking too much. Pay attention to how he responds when you have needs that conflict with his convenience. If you need emotional support during a difficult time, does he show up for you, or does he become uncomfortable and suggest you talk to a therapist or a friend? If you want to spend time together when he's busy, does he find ways to make it work, or does he make you feel guilty for asking? If you need him to be flexible about plans or priorities, does he accommodate you willingly, or does he resist any changes to his routine? Be particularly aware of whether he treats you like an addition to his life, rather than an integral part of it. You might feel like an accessory that makes his life more pleasant, rather than a partner with whom he's building something meaningful. Your role might be to provide companionship for social events, emotional support during stressful times, or physical intimacy when he desires it, but you're not integrated into his decision-making, his future planning, or his daily life in meaningful ways. The convenience factor often shows up in how he handles transitions and changes in his life. When his circumstances change, does he consider how those changes will affect you and your relationship? Or does he make decisions based solely on what works best for him? If he gets a job offer in another city, if his children need more of his attention, or if his financial situation changes, are you part of the conversation about how to navigate these changes together? Or are you simply expected to adapt or step aside? Notice whether he seems to take your presence in his life for granted. Does he express gratitude for what you bring to the relationship? Or does he seem to assume that you'll always be available and accommodating? Does he make efforts to nurture and grow your connection? Or does he coast along assuming that your relationship will maintain itself without investment from him? Another sign of the convenience factor is when he resists anything that requires effort, sacrifice, or compromise on his part. He might be happy to accept the benefits of your relationship as long as they don't require him to stretch, grow, or give up anything significant. But when the relationship requires him to be vulnerable, to make sacrifices, or to prioritize your needs sometimes over his own comfort, he becomes resistant or resentful. Be cautious of men who seem to compartmentalize you as their relationship person while maintaining other areas of their lives completely separately. You might fill his need for companionship and intimacy, but he continues to make all important decisions alone, maintains separate friend groups, and plans his future without consulting you or considering your needs and desires. The most telling sign of the convenience factor is how he handles the possibility of losing you. If you express dissatisfaction with the relationship or suggest that you might need to move on, does he take your concerns seriously and work to address them? Or does he minimize your feelings and assume you'll stay regardless? A man who sees you as convenient rather than essential will often take the risk that you'll continue to accept less than you deserve rather than doing the work necessary to create a truly fulfilling relationship. Section 10. When actions don't match words, the consistency. Testone of the most reliable ways to assess someone's emotional availability is to observe the consistency between their words and actions over time. Emotionally unavailable older men are often skilled at saying the right things, expressing appropriate sentiments, and making promises about their intentions, but their behavior tells a different story. This disconnect between words and actions is one of the clearest indicators that you're dealing with someone who is not truly available for genuine relationship. Pay attention to patterns over weeks and months, not just individual incidents. Anyone can have an off day, struggle with priorities occasionally, or fail to follow through on something due to circumstances beyond their control. But emotionally unavailable men show consistent patterns where their actions regularly fail to support their words, and these patterns persist despite conversations and promises to change. Notice whether he follows through on commitments, both large and small. This includes everything from showing up on time for dates to following through on emotional commitments like calling when he says he will, being present during difficult conversations, or making the changes he promises to make in response to your concerns. Consistent failure to follow through reveals someone who either doesn't prioritize the relationship or lacks the emotional capacity to translate intentions into actions. Be particularly aware of what happens after important conversations about the relationship. When you express concerns, needs, or desires for change, does his behavior shift to reflect what you've discussed? Or does he return to the same patterns within days or weeks? An emotionally available person will usually make genuine efforts to address issues that are important to their partner, even if they don't perfectly succeed immediately. Pay attention to how he handles promises and commitments to spend time together. Does he make plans and keep them reliably? Or are you constantly dealing with last-minute cancellations, changes, or emergencies that prevent him from following through? While life happens and schedules sometimes need to change, a pattern of unreliability suggests that you're not a genuine priority in his life. Notice whether his expressions of care and affection are backed up by consistent caring behavior. He might tell you how much he cares about you, but does he show up when you need support? Does he remember things that are important to you? Does he make efforts to nurture your relationship during ordinary, non-romantic moments? Words of affection without consistent caring actions are essentially meaningless. Be aware of promises about future behavior or relationship development. Does he tell you he wants to spend more time together but continue to be unavailable? Does he say he wants to work on being more open and communicative but continue to shut down during important conversations? Does he express interest in deepening your relationship but continue to maintain distance and barriers to intimacy? Watch for patterns in how he handles conflicts in difficult moments. Does he say he wants to work through problems together but then avoid, minimize, or shut down when conflicts arise? Does he express commitment to the relationship but threaten to leave or withdraw whenever things get challenging? His actions during difficult times reveal much more about his true commitment than his words during good times. Pay attention to whether his investment in the relationship matches his stated level of interest. If he says you're important to him, does he invest time, energy, and attention in building your relationship? Does he make sacrifices when necessary to prioritize your connection? Does he work to integrate you into his life in meaningful ways? Or do his actions suggest that while he enjoys your company, you're not actually a priority worth significant investment? Notice whether he takes responsibility for the disconnect between his words and actions when you point it out. An emotionally available person will usually acknowledge the inconsistency, take responsibility for their part, and make genuine efforts to align their behavior with their stated intentions. An emotionally unavailable person will often make excuses, blame circumstances, or suggest that you're expecting too much. Be particularly cautious of men who are excellent at grand gestures but poor at daily consistency. Some emotionally unavailable men will make dramatic romantic gestures, give expensive gifts, or plan elaborate dates to distract from their consistent failure to show up in small, daily ways. True love is revealed more in everyday kindnesses and consistent presence than in occasional grand gestures. The most important thing to understand is that when someone's actions consistently contradict their words, you should believe their actions. People can say anything, but behavior reveals true priorities, values, and emotional capacity. An emotionally available person who genuinely wants to be with you will find ways to align their actions with their words, because they understand that consistency is essential for building trust and intimacy. Don't make excuses for someone who consistently fails to match their behavior to their stated intentions. Don't convince yourself that his words reveal his true feelings while his actions are just circumstantial. In healthy relationships, words and actions support each other, creating a foundation of trust and reliability that allows love to flourish. Section 11. The future conversation. Avoiding commitment discussions. Of the most telling signs of emotional unavailability in older men is their consistent avoidance of conversations about the future of your relationship. These men might be perfectly comfortable discussing practical future plans like vacations, events, or social commitments, but they become evasive, uncomfortable, or defensive when conversations turn to the emotional and relational future you might build together. This avoidance often becomes apparent when you try to have what many call the relationship talk. You might want to discuss where things are heading, what you both want from the relationship, or how you see yourselves progressing together. An emotionally available man, even if he's uncertain about specifics, will usually engage in these conversations with honesty and openness, recognizing that clarity about mutual intentions is important for both partners. In contrast, an emotionally unavailable man will often deflect these conversations in sophisticated ways. He might say it's too early to have such discussions, suggest that defining the relationship will ruin its natural flow, or imply that your desire for clarity reveals insecurity or pressure on your part. He's essentially teaching you that wanting to understand where you stand is inappropriate or needy. Pay attention to how he responds when you bring up topics like exclusivity, meeting each other's families, future living arrangements, or long-term relationship goals. Does he engage thoughtfully with these topics, or does he change the subject, make jokes, or become uncomfortable? His response tells you a lot about whether he sees you as a temporary pleasant distraction or as someone with whom he might build a future. Notice whether he can discuss his own relationship wants and needs clearly. An emotionally available person usually has some sense of what they're looking for in a partner and relationship. Even if they're still getting to know you specifically, they can talk about their values around commitment, their desires for companionship, and their hopes for love without feeling threatened or pressured. An emotionally unavailable man often claims he doesn't know what he wants, needs more time to figure things out, or prefers to just see where things go naturally. While some uncertainty is normal, especially in early stages of dating, persistent inability to articulate relationship goals often indicate someone who is fundamentally ambivalent about commitment or unwilling to be honest about their limitations. Be aware of men who can discuss future plans that include you but resist conversations about the relationship itself. He might be comfortable planning a trip together next month or discussing holiday plans, but he becomes evasive when you want to talk about what your relationship means, where it's heading, or how you both feel about exclusivity and commitment. Watch for patterns where he becomes distant or creates conflict after you've attempted to have conversations about the future. Some emotionally unavailable men will unconsciously or consciously sabotage the relationship whenever these discussions arise, as if the very mention of future commitment triggers their flight response. Pay attention to whether he uses your desire for clarity as a weapon against you. Does he make you feel needy, pressuring, or unreasonable for wanting to understand where you stand? Does he suggest that your need for clarity reveals character flaws or insecurities? This is a manipulation tactic designed to make you back down from legitimate relationship needs. Notice whether he can express genuine enthusiasm about a future that includes you. When he does engage in future conversations, does he seem excited about the possibilities, or does he approach the topic with reluctance and reservation? His emotional tone around future discussions often reveals his true feelings about long-term potential with you. Be cautious of men who make vague future statements without concrete meaning. He might say things like, "We'll see what happens," "I'm open to possibilities," or "I enjoy spending time with you," without ever committing to specific intentions or timelines. These non-committal statements are designed to keep you hopeful without actually promising anything. The most problematic pattern is when future avoidance becomes a permanent feature of your relationship. If you've been dating for months and still can't have clear conversations about where things are heading, you're likely dealing with someone who has no intention of moving toward greater commitment and intimacy. It's important to understand that wanting clarity about your relationship's direction is not needy or pressuring. It's mature and responsible. You deserve to know where you stand so you can make informed decisions about how to invest your time and emotional energy. A man who is genuinely interested in building something with you will welcome these conversations as opportunities to explore your compatibility and shared goals. Don't allow someone to make you feel ashamed for having normal human needs for security, clarity, and forward movement in relationships. Don't accept indefinite ambiguity as the price of keeping him comfortable. Healthy relationships involve ongoing conversations about mutual needs, shared goals, and relationship development. Section 12. Red flags in social situations. How an emotionally unavailable man behaves in social situations can reveal crucial information about his emotional capacity and his genuine feelings about your relationship. Social settings strip away some of the privacy and control that allows emotionally unavailable men to manage their image and maintain their emotional distance. Paying attention to his behavior around others can provide invaluable insights into his true character and his real level of investment in your relationship. Notice how he introduces you to others and how he talks about your relationship in social settings. An emotionally available man who is genuinely invested in your relationship will usually introduce you warmly and naturally, often with subtle or obvious pride in your connection. He might introduce you by name and relationship status if appropriate, or at minimum with clear affection and respect. In contrast, an emotionally unavailable man might introduce you awkwardly, without clear context about your relationship, or in ways that deliberately downplay your significance in his life. He might introduce you simply by your first name, without any relationship context, even in situations where that context would be natural and appropriate. This behavior suggests he's uncomfortable with others knowing about your relationship or unwilling to publicly acknowledge your importance in his life. Pay attention to his body language and behavior when you're together in social situations. Does he maintain physical and emotional connection with you, or does he seem to distance himself when others are around? Some emotionally unavailable men become noticeably cooler, more formal, or more distant in public, as if acknowledging your relationship in front of others is threatening or uncomfortable for them. Watch how he includes you in social conversations and activities. Does he naturally include you in discussions, make sure you feel comfortable and welcomed, and show consideration for your experience in social situations? Or does he seem to forget about you, become absorbed in other conversations, and leave you to manage social situations on your own? Be aware of how he handles questions about your relationship from others. When friends or acquaintances ask about your relationship status, your future plans, or how long you've been together, how does he respond? Does he answer comfortably and honestly? Or does he become evasive, change the subject, or give minimal responses that reveal nothing about his feelings or intentions? Notice whether his behavior toward you changes when certain people are around. Some emotionally unavailable men will be warm and attentive in some social settings, but become distant or formal when around their family, close friends, or colleagues. This inconsistency suggests he's managing different images of himself rather than being authentically connected to you across all situations. Pay attention to whether he seeks your input and includes you in social decision-making. When planning social activities, choosing restaurants, or making plans with others, does he consider your preferences and include you in decisions? Or does he make social plans independently and expect you to adapt to his choices without consultation? Be aware of how he talks about you when he thinks you're not listening. Sometimes you might overhear him discussing you with others or describing your relationship in ways that surprise you. Does his private description of your relationship match what he tells you directly? Does he speak about you with warmth and respect? Or does he downplay your significance or express ambivalence about your connection? Notice how he handles social conflicts or disagreements that involve you. If there's tension in social situations, if someone is rude to you, or if social dynamics become uncomfortable, does he support you appropriately? Does he show loyalty to your relationship? Or does he distance himself from conflict even when you could use his support? Watch for signs that he compartmentalizes your relationship by keeping you away from certain social circles or situations. While it's normal to integrate someone gradually into your social world, persistent exclusion from important social contexts suggests he's not serious about your relationship or uncomfortable with others knowing about your connection. Be particularly aware of how he behaves at events that are important to you. When you invite him to social situations that matter to you, such as work events, family gatherings, or celebrations with your friends, does he attend willingly and behave supportively, or does he resist attending, seem uncomfortable, or behave in ways that suggest he'd rather be elsewhere? Pay attention to whether social situations seem to stress him in ways that suggest discomfort with public commitment or connection. Some emotionally unavailable men become noticeably anxious or uncomfortable in social situations where their relationship status might be discussed or where they might be seen as part of a couple. The most important thing to observe is whether his social behavior supports and honors your relationship or whether it suggests ambivalence, discomfort, or unwillingness to publicly acknowledge your significance in his life. Someone who is genuinely invested in your relationship will usually be proud to be seen with you and comfortable acknowledging your connection to others. Section 13. The Therapy and Self-Awareness Facade. Many emotionally unavailable older men have learned to speak the language of therapy and self-awareness without actually possessing genuine emotional intelligence or availability. They might use psychological terminology, discuss their past traumas with seeming insight, or even attend therapy regularly. But they use this knowledge as another sophisticated mask rather than as a foundation for genuine emotional growth and availability. This therapeutic facade can be particularly seductive for older women who value emotional intelligence and self-awareness in their partners. You might be impressed by his apparent psychological sophistication, his ability to analyze relationship dynamics, or his willingness to discuss emotional concepts. However, there's a crucial difference between intellectual understanding of emotions and actual emotional availability. Pay attention to whether his self-awareness translates into behavioral change and emotional growth. Can he identify his patterns and triggers? More importantly, does he take responsibility for changing problematic behaviors and developing greater emotional capacity? Someone who is genuinely committed to emotional growth will show evidence of change over time, not just awareness of their limitations. Notice whether he uses therapy speak to avoid accountability or create distance. Some emotionally unavailable men will use psychological concepts to explain away their behavior without taking responsibility for changing it. He might say things like, "I have abandonment issues," "I struggle with intimacy because of my childhood," or "I'm working on my emotional availability." But these statements serve as excuses rather than motivations for growth. Be aware of whether his emotional insights apply only to himself or whether he shows genuine empathy and understanding for your emotional experience. True emotional intelligence involves the ability to attune to others' feelings, not just analyze your own. Does he show genuine interest in understanding your emotional world, or does he primarily focus on his own psychological landscape? Watch for patterns where he uses psychological analysis to deflect from present moment emotional connection. Some emotionally unavailable men will intellectualize feelings rather than actually feeling them. When you express emotions or need emotional connection, does he respond with psychological analysis of why you're feeling that way? Or does he meet you with genuine empathy and emotional presence? Pay attention to whether his therapy work seems to be making him more available and connected, or whether it serves as another form of compartmentalization. Is therapy helping him become a better partner, or does it become another separate area of his life that doesn't integrate with his relationship behavior? Notice whether he can apply his self-awareness to improve your relationship specifically. Can he recognize when his emotional limitations are affecting you? Does he take responsibility for how his unavailability impacts your connection? Most importantly, Does he work actively to change patterns that are harmful to your relationship? Be cautious of men who use their therapy work as evidence that they're doing enough emotional work without actually becoming more emotionally available. They might pride themselves on their self-awareness while continuing to maintain emotional distance, avoid vulnerability, and resist genuine intimacy. Watch for whether his emotional vocabulary translates into emotional actions. Can he not only identify emotions but also express them authentically? Can he be vulnerable in real time, or does he only discuss vulnerability as a concept? Does he show emotional courage in your relationship, or does he hide behind intellectual understanding of emotional concepts? Pay attention to whether he uses his understanding of psychology to manipulate or control relationship dynamics. Some emotionally sophisticated but unavailable men will use psychological concepts to make you feel like your needs are unreasonable, your emotions are problematic, or your expectations are pathological. Notice whether his self-awareness includes recognition of how his emotional unavailability affects others, particularly you. True emotional growth involves understanding not just your own internal landscape, but also your impact on others. Does he show genuine concern for how his limitations affect your well-being and happiness? Be aware of whether he uses his past trauma as a permanent excuse for present emotional limitations. While past experiences certainly shape our emotional capacity, using them as permanent explanations for current unavailability suggests someone who is not committed to healing and growth. The most important distinction is between self-awareness as a tool for growth and self-awareness as a sophisticated defense mechanism. Someone who is genuinely committed to emotional development will show increasing availability, vulnerability, and capacity for intimacy over time. Their self-awareness will serve their relationships, not protect them from the challenges and vulnerabilities that real love requires. Section 14. Recognizing your own patterns and vulnerabilities while. It's important to recognize signs of emotional unavailability in others. It's equally crucial to examine your own patterns and vulnerabilities that might make you susceptible to these types of relationships. As an older woman, you bring your own relationship history, attachment patterns, and emotional needs to every new connection. Understanding these aspects of yourself can help you make better choices and avoid repeatedly attracting or accepting emotionally unavailable partners. Many women find themselves in patterns with emotionally unavailable men because these relationships feel familiar in some way. If you grew up with emotionally distant parents, experienced inconsistent care in childhood, or learned that love requires struggle and uncertainty, you might unconsciously gravitate toward relationships that recreate these familiar dynamics. Recognizing these patterns is the first step toward changing them. Examine your own relationship with emotional needs and vulnerability. Do you feel comfortable expressing your needs directly, or do you tend to minimize them to avoid seeming needy or demanding? Women who struggle to advocate for their own emotional needs often attract partners who are comfortable taking without giving, creating relationships where emotional unavailability can flourish unchallenged. Pay attention to whether you have a pattern of trying to fix, heal, or change emotionally unavailable partners. If you find yourself consistently drawn to men who need emotional work, who have obvious limitations, or who present as projects rather than partners, you might be more invested in the potential for change than in the reality of who they are right now. Notice whether you tend to make excuses for problematic behavior or focus on someone's potential rather than their actual availability. Do you find yourself explaining away red flags, justifying someone's emotional distance, or focusing on the rare moments of connection while minimizing the consistent patterns of unavailability? Be honest about whether you struggle with your own fears of intimacy. Sometimes we're drawn to emotionally unavailable partners because they feel safer than someone who might actually want to know us deeply and love us fully. If true intimacy feels threatening to you, you might unconsciously choose partners who will never push you toward the vulnerability that genuine love requires. Examine your relationship with being alone and single. If you're uncomfortable with solitude or desperate to be in relationship regardless of quality, you might accept emotional unavailability as better than being alone. This mindset makes you vulnerable to settling for relationships that don't truly nourish you. Consider whether you have unrealistic expectations about what you can give or receive in relationships. Some women exhaust themselves trying to be the perfect, understanding, patient partner, hoping that their exceptional giving will inspire exceptional love in return. This approach often attracts takers who are happy to receive your emotional generosity, without reciprocating. Pay attention to your own communication patterns around needs and boundaries. Do you express your needs clearly and directly, or do you hint, hope, and expect others to read your mind? Do you maintain healthy boundaries, or do you tend to merge your identity with your romantic relationships? Notice whether you have a pattern of staying too long in relationships that aren't working. Do you tend to give relationship after relationship years of your life hoping for change that never comes? Are you someone who has difficulty ending relationships even when they're clearly not meeting your needs? Be honest about whether you're trying to prove something through your relationships. Are you trying to prove that you're lovable by accepting less than you deserve? Are you trying to prove your worth by fixing someone else's emotional limitations? Are you trying to prove your maturity by being endlessly patient with someone's unavailability? Examine your beliefs about love and relationships. Do you believe that real love requires struggle and uncertainty? Do you think that easy, healthy relationships are somehow less passionate or meaningful? Do you equate emotional intensity with depth of connection? Consider whether you're operating from scarcity thinking about love and partnership. Do you believe that your options are limited because of your age? Do you think you should be grateful for whatever attention you receive? Do you worry that if you have standards and boundaries, you'll end up alone? Be aware of whether you're trying to heal old wounds through new relationships. Sometimes we unconsciously choose partners who remind us of people who hurt us in the past, hoping that this time we can earn the love that was previously withheld. This approach keeps us stuck in painful patterns, rather than moving toward healthy love. The most important step in changing these patterns is developing a loving, honest relationship with yourself. When you know your own worth, understand your patterns, and commit to your own emotional well-being, you naturally become less tolerant of emotional unavailability in others. You begin to choose partners based on how they actually treat you rather than on their potential or on your hope that you can inspire them to love you better. Section 15. Setting boundaries and protecting your emotional energy learning. To set appropriate boundaries with emotionally unavailable men is crucial for protecting your emotional well-being and maintaining your sense of self-worth. As an older woman, you've likely developed various coping strategies throughout your life. But dealing with sophisticated emotional unavailability requires specific, boundary-setting skills that many women have never had to develop. The first step in boundary setting is recognizing that you have the right to expect emotional availability, consistency, and genuine investment from romantic partners. Many women, especially those who have been conditioned to be understanding and accommodating, struggle with believing they deserve full emotional partnership. You do not need to settle for emotional breadcrumbs or accept unavailability as the price of companionship. Establish clear expectations about communication and follow through early in relationships. If someone says they'll call, you have the right to expect that they will. If they make plans with you, you have the right to expect they'll keep them unless there's a genuine emergency. If they express interest in getting to know you better, you have the right to expect that they'll ask meaningful questions and remember your answers. Set boundaries around mixed signals and inconsistent behavior. You don't have to accept being treated warmly one day and coldly the next. You don't have to tolerate someone who pursues you intensely and then disappears. You have the right to address these patterns directly and to walk away if they continue. Learn to recognize and interrupt your own tendency to make excuses for problematic behavior. When you catch yourself explaining away red flags or focusing on someone's potential rather than their actions, pause and ask yourself what you would tell a friend in the same situation. Often we can see clearly for others what we struggle to see for ourselves. Develop the skill of addressing concerns directly rather than hoping things will improve on their own. If someone's behavior is bothering you or if you're not getting your needs met, speak up clearly and directly. Don't hint, don't hope they'll figure it out, and don't wait for the right moment that may never come. Set time boundaries around uncertainty and ambiguity in relationships. You don't have to accept indefinite lack of clarity about where you stand or where the relationship is heading. It's reasonable to expect some indication of mutual interest and direction within a reasonable time frame, typically within a few months of regular dating. Protect your energy by refusing to participate in relationship dynamics that drain you. If someone consistently leaves you feeling confused, frustrated, or emotionally depleted, that's information about the health of the connection. Healthy relationships should energize and nourish you more than they drain you. Learn to say no to requests that don't feel good to you, even if they seem reasonable on the surface. If he wants to keep things casual when you want something more serious, you can say no. If he wants all the benefits of your companionship without offering commitment or emotional availability, you can refuse to participate. Set boundaries around being someone's therapist, mother, or emotional support system without reciprocity. While healthy relationships involve mutual support, you're not obligated to provide endless emotional labor to someone who doesn't reciprocate or appreciate your efforts. Develop scripts for common boundary-setting situations. Practice saying things like, "I'm looking for someone who can match my level of emotional availability. I need clarity about where this relationship is heading." Or, "I'm not comfortable continuing to invest in someone who can't." Commit to building something together. Trust your instincts. When something feels off, even if you can't articulate exactly what's wrong, your emotional and intuitive responses to someone's behavior are valuable information. Don't talk yourself out of gut feelings that suggest someone isn't right for you. Set boundaries around how much time and energy you're willing to invest in relationships that aren't progressing. It's reasonable to limit how long you'll date someone who can't or won't move toward greater intimacy and commitment. Your time is precious, and you deserve to invest it in relationships with genuine potential. Learn to walk away from situations that consistently violate your boundaries, even if you care about the person. Loving someone doesn't mean accepting treatment that isn't good for you. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for both yourself and someone else is to refuse to enable their emotional unavailability. Protect yourself from gaslighting and manipulation by trusting your own perceptions and experiences. If someone tries to convince you that your needs are unreasonable, your standards are too high, or your emotions are problematic, remember that these are often tactics used to make you accept less than you deserve. Develop a support system of friends, family, or professionals who can help you maintain perspective when you're dealing with emotionally unavailable men. Sometimes we need outside input to see situations clearly, especially when we're emotionally invested in the outcome. Remember that setting boundaries is not about punishing others or being difficult. It's about protecting your own well-being and maintaining your standards for how you want to be treated in relationships. Boundaries are an act of self-love and self-respect that ultimately benefit everyone involved. Section 16. The cost of accepting emotional unavailability understanding. The true cost of accepting emotional unavailability is crucial for older women who might be tempted to settle for less than they deserve in relationships. The price you pay for staying with an emotionally unavailable man extends far beyond the obvious frustrations and disappointments. It affects your self-esteem, your future relationship capacity, your overall life satisfaction, and even your physical and mental health. One of the most significant costs is the erosion of your own emotional capacity and well-being. When you're constantly trying to connect with someone who is fundamentally unavailable, you begin to doubt your own worth and lovability. You might start to believe that you're too needy, too emotional, or expecting too much from relationships. This internal criticism can damage your self-esteem and make you accept increasingly lower standards for how you deserve to be treated. Living with emotional unavailability creates chronic stress and emotional exhaustion. You're constantly trying to decode mixed signals, hoping for changes that never come, and investing emotional energy in someone who cannot or will not reciprocate. This ongoing stress can affect your sleep, your health, your energy levels, and your ability to enjoy other aspects of your life. Perhaps most tragically, accepting emotional unavailability prevents you from experiencing the deep, fulfilling love that you deserve. Every day you spend trying to make an emotionally unavailable relationship work is a day you're not available for someone who could truly love and appreciate you. Time is precious, especially as we get older, and investing it in relationships without genuine potential is a significant opportunity cost. Staying in emotionally unavailable relationships can also affect your other relationships and life pursuits. You might find yourself so preoccupied with trying to make your romantic relationship work that you neglect friendships, family relationships, hobbies, career development, or personal growth opportunities. The emotional drain of unavailable love can leave you with little energy for other important aspects of your life. There's also a cumulative effect on your relationship skills and expectations. The longer you accept emotional unavailability, the more you normalize it and the less capable you become of recognizing and attracting genuine emotional availability. You might find yourself losing touch with what healthy relationship dynamics actually look and feel like. Your emotional and sexual needs remain unmet in relationships with emotionally unavailable men. You might find yourself feeling lonely even when you're in relationship, sexually unfulfilled even if you're physically intimate, and emotionally starved despite spending significant time with someone. This chronic unmet need can affect your overall life satisfaction and sense of vitality. The pattern of accepting emotional unavailability can also teach you to betray your own needs and instincts. You learn to ignore red flags, minimize your concerns, and prioritize someone else's comfort over your own well-being. This self-betrayal can affect your ability to trust yourself and make good decisions in all areas of your life. Financial costs can also be significant, especially if you're investing in shared activities, travel, or lifestyle changes to accommodate someone who will never truly commit to building a life with you. You might find yourself spending money on relationships that have no real future potential. There are social costs as well. Friends and family might become frustrated watching you invest in relationships that clearly aren't working. You might find yourself isolated from your support system because you're embarrassed about your relationship dynamics or because others have stopped offering advice that you consistently ignore. The emotional unavailability can become a model for other relationships in your life. You might find yourself accepting less than you deserve in friendships, family relationships, or professional situations because you've normalized emotional unavailability as acceptable treatment. Perhaps most importantly, accepting emotional unavailability can prevent you from developing your own emotional capacity and growth. Healthy relationships challenge us to become more vulnerable, more communicative, more generous, and more loving. When you're stuck trying to connect with someone who can't meet you emotionally, you miss opportunities for your own emotional development and expansion. The cost also includes the impact on your future relationship capacity. The longer you spend in emotionally unavailable relationships, the more defensive and guarded you might become. You might develop your own protective mechanisms that make it harder to be open and available when you do meet someone who is genuinely capable of love. There's also the cost of modeling unhealthy relationship dynamics for children, grandchildren, or other young people in your life who look to you for examples of what love should look like. Accepting emotional unavailability teaches others that this is normal and acceptable in relationships. Finally, there's the spiritual and existential cost of not living authentically and fully. Love is one of the most profound and meaningful experiences available to human beings. When you accept emotional unavailability, you're settling for a pale imitation of what love can actually be. You're denying yourself the opportunity to experience the full depth, joy, and growth that authentic love can bring to your life. Understanding these costs doesn't mean judging yourself harshly if you've made these choices in the past. It means recognizing that you deserve so much more, and that it's never too late to change course and hold out for the love that will truly nourish and fulfill you. Section 17. Healing and moving forward. You recognize that you've been involved with emotionally unavailable men, or that you have patterns of accepting less than you deserve in relationships. The path forward involves both healing from past experiences and developing new skills and perspectives that will help you attract and maintain healthier connections. This healing process is not just about avoiding emotionally unavailable men. It's about becoming the most emotionally available version of yourself. The first step in healing is often grieving what you've lost to emotionally unavailable relationships. This includes grieving the time, energy, and love you've invested in relationships that couldn't reciprocate. It means acknowledging the dreams and hopes you had that were never fulfilled and the parts of yourself that you may have suppressed or lost in trying to accommodate someone else's limitations. Allow yourself to feel angry about being treated in ways that were less than you deserved. Anger can be a healthy response to mistreatment, and it can fuel your commitment to better standards in the future. Don't rush to forgiveness or understanding before you fully acknowledge the impact of accepting emotional unavailability. Work on developing a stronger, more loving relationship with yourself. This means treating yourself with the kindness, consistency, and emotional availability that you've been seeking from others. Practice meeting your own emotional needs, comforting yourself during difficult times, and celebrating your successes and growth. Examine and heal your own attachment patterns and relationship wounds. If you have patterns of attracting or accepting emotionally unavailable partners, there are usually underlying beliefs, fears, or unhealed wounds that contribute to these choices. Consider working with a therapist who specializes in attachment and relationship patterns. Develop your own emotional intelligence and availability. Work on identifying and expressing your emotions clearly, setting healthy boundaries and communicating your needs directly. The more emotionally available you become to yourself and others, the more likely you are to attract partners who can match your emotional capacity. Practice being alone and enjoying your own company. Developing comfort with solitude reduces desperation in relationships and helps you make choices from a place of desire rather than need. When you're happy and fulfilled as a single person, you're less likely to settle for relationships that don't truly enhance your life. Rebuild your sense of self-worth and what you deserve in relationships. Make lists of your positive qualities, your accomplishments, and what you bring to relationships. Remind yourself regularly that you deserve to be loved, cherished, and prioritized by a romantic partner. Develop new relationship skills, including the ability to recognize emotional availability in others early in dating. Learn to ask questions that reveal someone's emotional capacity. Notice actions that demonstrate genuine interest and investment, and trust your instincts when something feels off. Create a vision of what you actually want in a relationship, not just what you want to avoid. Get specific about the qualities, behaviors, and relationship dynamics that would truly make you happy. Having a clear positive vision helps you recognize it when you encounter it. Build a strong support system of friends, family, and possibly professionals who can help you maintain perspective in future relationships. Having people in your life who know your patterns and will lovingly hold you accountable can be invaluable in breaking cycles of accepting emotional unavailability. Work on developing patience and trust in the process of finding genuine love. Healing from patterns of emotional unavailability takes time, and finding a truly compatible, emotionally available partner also takes time. Rushing the process often leads back to accepting less than you deserve. Practice self-compassion throughout this healing process. Change is difficult, and old patterns often resurface even when you're committed to doing things differently. Treat yourself with kindness when you make mistakes or find yourself slipping back into old patterns. Develop new activities, interests, and sources of fulfillment that don't depend on romantic relationships. The more satisfied and engaged you are with your own life, the less likely you are to settle for poor treatment from others. Build a life that you love whether you're single or partnered. Learn to trust your instincts and your own perceptions about relationships. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Even if you can't articulate exactly what's bothering you, your emotional responses and gut feelings are valuable sources of information about whether someone is right for you. Consider what lessons and wisdom you've gained from your experiences with emotionally unavailable men. While these relationships may have been painful, they've also taught you important things about yourself, about love, and about what you truly value in partnerships. Focus on becoming the kind of partner you want to attract. If you want someone who is emotionally available, communicative, and genuinely interested in building something together, work on developing these qualities in yourself. Like attracts like in relationships, and emotional availability attracts emotional availability. Be willing to be vulnerable and open when you do meet someone who demonstrates genuine emotional availability. Don't let past hurts prevent you from showing up authentically with someone who deserves your trust and openness. Finally, maintain faith that genuine, mutual, emotionally available love is possible for you, regardless of your age, your past experiences, or your previous patterns. You deserve to experience the kind of love that enhances your life, celebrates who you are, and inspires both partners to grow and flourish together. As we reach the end of our deep dive into recognizing emotional unavailability in older men, I want you to remember that this knowledge is power. Understanding these patterns and red flags isn't meant to make you cynical about love or suspicious of every man you meet. Instead, it's meant to empower you to make informed choices about where you invest your precious time, energy, and emotional resources. You are worthy of a love that shows up consistently, communicates openly, and chooses you every single day. You deserve someone who doesn't just enjoy your company when it's convenient, but who actively works to build something beautiful with you. You deserve emotional availability, genuine intimacy, and a partner who sees loving you as a privilege, not a burden. Remember that recognizing emotional unavailability early doesn't mean you're being picky or demanding too much. It means you understand your worth and you're committed to accepting nothing less than genuine partnership. Every time you walk away from emotional unavailability, you're making space for the authentic love that you deserve. The patterns we've discussed today aren't character flaws that you need to fix in others, and they're not challenges you need to overcome through patience and understanding. Emotional unavailability is a fundamental incompatibility with the kind of love that will truly fulfill you. When you recognize these patterns, honor what you've learned and make choices that serve your highest good. As mature women, we have the wisdom to know that life is too short to spend it trying to earn love from people who are incapable of giving it. We have the experience to recognize the difference between temporary relationship challenges and fundamental emotional limitations. We have the strength to walk away from what isn't working and the courage to keep our hearts open for what will. If this video has opened your eyes to patterns in your own relationships or helped you understand experiences you've had with emotionally unavailable men, please share it with other women who might benefit from this information. Use the share button to send it to friends who are dating, post it on social media, or simply have conversations with other women about these important topics. Your support of this channel through likes, comments, and subscriptions helps us reach more women with content that can genuinely change their relationship experiences. If you found this video particularly valuable, consider supporting us with super thanks, which allows us to continue creating in-depth, meaningful content about relationships and dating. In the comments below, I'd love to hear about your experiences. What patterns have you recognized in your own dating life? What red flags do you wish you had noticed earlier? What advice would you give to other women who are navigating the dating world? Your insights and experiences can help other women feel less alone and more empowered in their own relationship journeys. Remember, choosing to be single rather than settling for emotional unavailability is not giving up on love. It's choosing yourself and maintaining space for the love that will truly nourish you. You are never too old for genuine love, real partnership, and authentic intimacy. The right person will celebrate your standards, not ask you to lower them. Keep your heart open, trust your instincts, and never forget that you deserve nothing less than a love that chooses you fully, shows up consistently, and grows more beautiful with time. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll continue exploring how to create the love and relationships that will truly fulfill. You don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest content on love, relationships, and dating after 40. Your journey to authentic love matters, and I'm honored to be part of supporting you along the way.